If someone were to listen to everything that you have to say and implement it in their lives, on average, how much do you think they could increase their lifespan?
7 years. 7 years, not just to their lifespan, but to their health span. That's the most important thing, is we're not just trying to live longer. I mean, most people die in their 70s and leave this earth in their 80s, right? Or they die in their 60s and they leave this earth in their 70s. And by that, I mean their health span ends and their lifespan continues for usually 10 years, and it's a prolonged, increasing portion of their life where there's just an increasing level of suffrage until they're gone. What we're talking about at a minimum is extending your health span to match your lifespan, because lifespan's how many years you're on Earth. Your health span is like, how many of those years are you enjoying? And the truth is that we chalk so many things up to a consequence of aging. We accept so many things in our life as a consequence of aging that are not a consequence of aging at all. They're a consequence of missing raw material in the human body, and I'll explain that. But as we get older, and this is happening in younger and younger ages, by the way, weight gain, water retention, brain fog, poor focus and concentration, lack of waking energy, poor response to exercise, poor short-term recall, all of these things that that we believe are just consequences of aging. I'm in my 30s. I don't remember things as well. I'm in my 40s. I got a spare tire around the middle, and I've got a little bit of hypertension, and I never really sleep that well.
So on that 7-year figure, how do you know that so confidently? It seems like when you give the response, it's like, without a shadow of a doubt, it's 7 years. How do you know?
It's an absolute, because in the big data models that we had, towards the tail end of my career, I would go in sometimes and just manipulate the model because, during my career, I wasn't actually allowed to have any contact with the patient or any contact with the treating physician. And for the record, I'm not a physician. I'm not licensed to practice medicine. And what the law provided for was when you're applying for a life insurance policy, and someone's analyzing your medical data and your demographic data, they didn't want that person all of a sudden jumping in and taking over your healthcare. But the truth is that even if I saw life-threatening drug interactions in the record, I couldn't contact the patient or the treating physician to warn them.
So what would be a life-threatening drug interaction?
So 2 different pharmaceutical medications, one prescribed by one physician, one prescribed by another physician, that have what's called a contraindication. Some of the contraindications are things like thrombolytic events, which are blood clots. So throwing a pulmonary embolism, an aneurysm, a deep vein thrombosis. These are drugs that, when put in combination with one another, can cause severe reactions. Like, for example, some SSRIs interact with methylene blue. So looking at this vast array of pharmaceuticals that people are on and the interactions between these compounds in the human body. And one of the interesting things about pharmaceutical research is it's very myopic, it's studied in a very, very narrow vertical. So in other words, if we're just looking at cholesterol and the effect that a statin has on cholesterol, we're only looking at that outcome. We're not saying, well, what if this person is on a statin, also on high blood pressure medication, also is suffering from depression and is on an SSRI, and is also taking pain medication? Well, now you have a completely different landscape. We don't look at that. We don't look at multifactorial drugs in the human body. And it just takes me back to the basics for a moment. If I was to put up a chart, and it's a chart of your cellular biology, it's a chart of what's called the methylation process in your body. It's infinitely complex. It looks like 6 New York City subway maps stacked on top of each other. Okay, there's transactions and loops feeding into other loops, and it looks extraordinarily complex. The reason why I show that chart is I say, if you look at this chart of your cellular biology, the hundreds of billions of transactions going on in your body every day, what you won't see on that chart are any chemicals, there are no synthetics, and there are no pharmaceuticals. And so if we start with the premise that if this intricate network begins to break down, why are we fixing it with deficiencies that we cannot have? Because if you want to see magic happen in human beings, you first give their body the raw material it needs to do its job, which is fascinating to me that we believe this so much in plant physiology, but we don't believe it in human physiology. As I was pulling up here today, I saw these palm trees and, in some of these yards. If a leaf were ever rotting in one of these palm trees and you called a true arborist, a true botanist out to take a look at that tree, they actually wouldn't touch the leaf. They would core test the soil. And they would say, you know what, Jack, there's no nitrogen in this soil. And they would add nitrogen to the soil and the leaf would heal. Human beings are no different. When you deprive the body of certain raw material, you get the expression of disease. And so now we're bringing chemicals, synthetics, and pharmaceuticals in to fix the expression of a nutrient deficiency. The human body needs certain raw materials to function. It needs vitamins, it needs minerals, it needs amino acids, it needs fatty acids. So for example, if you've probably heard the term essential fatty acids. That means they're essential for life. There are fats that are essential for life. There are essential amino acids. These are the building blocks of proteins. They're essential for life. There's no such thing, by the way, as an essential carbohydrate. So just let that settle in for a second. No such thing as an essential carbohydrate. They're not necessary for life. So what happens if we become deficient in some of the essentials? Amino acids, minerals, nutrients, fatty acids, the very, very basics, right? You start to get the expression of disease. And now we're going to pharma and modern medicine to say, why do I have headaches all the time? Instead of saying, what's causing my headache, right? We're going to our doctor and they say, you have a little bit of high blood pressure. Well, why do I have high blood pressure? They can't find anything wrong with my heart. My EKG is normal. My EEG is normal. My cardiac exams are all normal. Well, we don't know. But now that we have your family history, your uncle had it, your mother has it, your mother's brother has it. You have genetically inherited hypertension, and you just accept that and you start taking medication for it.
So you're saying that using the law of big numbers, maybe one person can't directly increase their lifespan or health span by 7 years. But since you had access to hundreds of millions of records of people's lives and their deaths, you're able to make these minor tweaks and then see on average, based off of those hundreds of millions of records and data points, how it would affect their lifespan. And on average, with these minor tweaks, you could average a 7-year higher.
No question. So, and I'll give you a very specific example. We know, for example, that modern medicine, medical error, is the third leading cause of death. And that's astounding when you think about cardiovascular disease, then cancer, and number 3 is modern medicine. It's medical error. The 2016 Harvard University study confirmed this. I think it was later confirmed by Johns Hopkins in 2019. The study actually got worse. Why is medical error the third leading cause of death? Well, let's just back up and look at some basic nutrient deficiencies that go. Take the most prominent nutrient deficiency in the world, which is vitamin D3. Okay, when God made us, He made us with the ability to make one vitamin. If I pulled the blood of everybody listening to this podcast right now, you'd see that there are hundreds of vitamins in your bloodstream. Okay, you're only capable of making one. And it's called vitamin D3, cholecalciferol. We make it from sunlight and cholesterol. So think about how important that nutrient, that vitamin, which also acts as a hormone, must be to human function if it's the only one that human beings make on our own. And in fact, that deficiency was the second leading cause of morbidity in COVID. That deficiency is one of the leading causes of autoimmune disease.
What are the symptoms of it? So how do you know?
I'll give you a perfect example of what we saw in the medical record all the time. You'd see somebody with a clinically deficient level of vitamin D3. And this would go on for years and years and years and years. And you'd see that they actually are really susceptible to colds, flus, influenza. They had repeated viral infections. And then all of a sudden, when they get out of bed in the morning, the soles of their feet and their ankles are really sore and achy when they walk to the bathroom to take their first pee. They wake up sore and achy like they had a workout the night before when they haven't. It moves up to their hips and their low back. And eventually, they're like, they go to their primary care physician like, Doc, it hurts when it's like my hands ache when I make a tight fist. Well, those symptoms also mimic something called rheumatoid arthritis. And so now your doctor goes, you know what, Jack, you got rheumatoid arthritis. But don't worry, I'm going to put you on something called a corticosteroid. It's an anti-inflammatory. I'm going to give you this and you're going to be just fine. Well, the problem with corticosteroids is if you start a corticosteroid, our records showed that you had 6 years and 1 day until you were having a joint replacement. And what that meant was the corticosteroid first would be anti-inflammatory, but then it would eat your joints like a termite. And so 6 years and 1 day later, you're having a joint replacement. And after a joint replacement, your mobility starts to go down. And as you become less mobile, you bring in all the diseases that exacerbate with reduced mobility. So if you rewind this back, you had a nutrient deficiency, and one of the most common deficiencies in the world. 50% of the world's population is deficient in vitamin D3. 85% of the African American and dark-complected Latinos are deficient in vitamin D3. And it's manifesting as something else. Now you've been diagnosed with a condition you don't have. You've been put on a medication that wasn't required, which forced a surgery that was unnecessary, which reduced your mobility and brought in diseases from your future that you never would have had. And you ended up succumbing to a disease that you never should have had because of a surgery that was unnecessary, because of a medication that wasn't needed, because of a diagnosis that was wrong.